Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf continues teaching about the lotteries which were drawn in the Beis HaMikdash to determine which Kohanim were going to do which avoda. As we had said in a previous Mishnah, there were 4 lotteries. This daf contains 3 Mishnayos, the one in the beginning, one in the middle, one at the end. The first Mishnah discusses the 3rd and 4th lotteries which were drawn. The middle Mishnah discusses what happens when you have additional people that are needed because of a special day which requires more people for the avoda of the Karban Tamid. And the final Mishnah discusses other Karbanos and who performed those avodas and whether you needed a lottery for those or not. So, we begin with the first Mishnah, which discusses the 3rd lottery and the 4th lottery. And it says that the 3rd lottery was for people who didn't do Ketores yet, never got a chance to do Ketores, so a call went out in the Azar. Anybody who didn't do Ketores, come join the 3rd lottery. And they drew lots as to who's going to be the one to bring the Ketores on the inner Mizbeach, the golden Mizbeach. The reason why nobody else was allowed to draw it, the Gemara will discuss why it had to be somebody who was new, who never did it before. The 4th lottery, the Mishnah says, is who brings up the pieces of the Karban Tamid from the ramp to the top of the Mizbeach. In the 2nd lottery, we learned about who brings the pieces from the place where they were shechted and cut up to the ramp. It was put down on the ramp. It was put down on the bottom half of the ramp. Then it had to be moved from there up to the Mizbeach itself. Who did that? That was the 4th lottery. Okay, the Gemara begins by discussing what is the reason that only once in a person's life was he allowed to do the Ketores, and that the only people who were allowed to join the raffle, the lottery, were people who never did Ketores before. So the Gemara quotes a Brisa that says that the reason would seem to be because it makes you rich. Doing Ketores gives a bracha of wealth, and therefore everybody only gets one shot at it. So Gemara says, Rav Papa asked Abaye, what's the source for that? And I think I know what the source is, and I have a kasha on it. What does he think the source is? There's a pasuk that discusses Ketores, and right afterwards it talks about wealth. What does it say? It says, Yeromish b'techa liYakov, v'siroscha liYisrael, Yisimu Ketorah ba'apecha, v'chalil ha'mizbechecha. Right after it says, Baruch Hashem Mechelei. So it's said in there, Yisimu Ketorah ba'apecha. That refers to Ketores. And right afterwards it says, Baruch Hashem Mechelei. Hashem will bless your strength. Hashem will bless your wealth. So he says that's very good. But the problem is that in that same pasuk we just read, it says, V'chalil ha'mizbechecha. V'chalil ha'mizbechecha refers to Karban Olah. So then a Karban Olah should also bring wealth. And they're both linked to the next phrase, Baruch Hashem Mechelei, just as much. So Gemara says, no. The Ketores is far more rare than the Olah. Karban Olah happens all the time. Ketores only happened twice a day. So, therefore, it has to be that the rare thing causes wealth. If everybody who bought a Karban Olah got blessed with wealth, everybody would be running around extremely rich. Now, the Gemara has a drasha to say on this pasuk as well, unrelated drasha, but it says, Yeromish b'techa liYakov. That means that he will instruct your laws to Yaakov. The Gemara says that's referring to Shevet Levi. Shevet Levi teaches halacha, and there's only one other Shevet that teaches halacha, and that's Shevet Yisachar. Shevet Yisachar, because in Divrei Yamim, the pasuk says, Umi b'nei Yisachar yoidei bina, la'itim ladas mayasi Yisrael. So you see, b'nei Yisachar teaches bina, and times itim ladas mayasi Yisrael, and to know what Klal Yisrael is supposed to do. So Levi and Yisachar teach halacha to Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, what about Yehuda? Yehuda, it says in Tehillim, Yehuda mechaykiki. Versus no, Yehuda mechaykiki is not referring to halacha. Yehuda makes rules is referring to political leadership decisions, perhaps. It's not referring to halacha. I was only talking about halacha. Okay, now the Gemara discusses what happens with the Karban Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim, the afternoon Karban Tamid. We've been discussing up to now all the people that drew lots in order to be involved in doing the morning Karban Tamid. As we've seen on previous Mishnayos, there were 9 people involved in the actual bringing of the Karban Tamid pieces and parts and the Sachem and everything that's involved, bringing all that to the ramp of the Mizbeach. But that's only the morning Karban Tamid. What about the afternoon Karban Tamid? So it says, there is no separate lottery drawn for the Karban Tamid. Whoever won the lottery for the morning Karban Tamid, they do the same exact activities in the afternoon Karban Tamid. The Gemara says, hold on a second, we have a kasha on that. We have a few kashas on that. First of all, there's a brisa that says, just like they did a shachris, a morning lottery, they did an afternoon lottery as well. The Gemara says, well, that's not talking about Karban Tamid, it's talking about afternoon lottery for Ketores. That was also done twice, once in the morning, one in the afternoon. So Gemara says, what do you mean? But it says Kishem Shem Mefaisin Loi. It says just like you do one for it. It in the Loi, the word Loi is a masculine form that has to refer to a carbon tamid, which is a masculine form. It can't refer to Ketoros, which is a feminine form. It says, okay, change the text a little, make it law. Make it the feminine form, and then you change from Loi to law. That's an acceptable change, and it's referring to Ketoros. What do you mean? There's a different Brisa that says both. It says Kishem Shem Mefaisin Law. It says Kishem Mefaisim Loi Shachas Kach Mefaisim Loi Arvus. Kishem Mefaisim Lo Shachas Kach Mefaisim Lo Arvus. It talks about both of them. It says you do the feminine form twice, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and the masculine form twice, once in the afternoon. One's obviously referring to Ketoros, and one's referring to carbon and tamid of the afternoon. You can't just change the text. It says both separately. So Gemara says that's talking about a particular day. That's talking about on Shabbos. On Shabbos it was a switch of shifts. The shift of Kohanim switched between the morning carbon tamid and the afternoon carbon tamid. So the people who did the carbon tamid avod in the morning were not around in the afternoon, and therefore you needed to do a new lottery for the afternoon. So Gemara says, well, okay, I'll accept that. But according to our original understanding, where we were trying to claim that there was another lottery that was done for the afternoon, so then our list doesn't fit. We said that there were 4 lotteries. According to this, there's not a 4th lottery. There's a 5th lottery. There's a 5th one for the afternoon. So it says, no, it's not that there was a 5th lottery for the afternoon. The lottery for the afternoon, according to our original understanding that there was a separate lottery for the afternoon, that was still performed in the morning event, the morning lottery event. They drew lots for the first Talmud, and then they drew lots for the second in the Talmud without dispersing and regathering. So it was all part of one lottery. It was just 2 separate drawings, but it was only one gathering of Kohanim. And when we counted 4, we were talking about 4 gatherings of Kohanim that there were. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to discuss bringing the pieces of the carbon tamid from the ramp up to the Mizbeach. So we saw in our Mishnah that the 4th lottery was who gets to do that. So the Gemara says there's a machlokas about that. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov disagrees with our Mishnah, and he says that nobody gets to do that. The same people who put it on the ramp come back and they bring it up to the Mizbeach itself. It has to be put on the ramp for a while. It has to stay there. There's a pause there, but you don't have somebody new to bring it up from the ramp to the top of the Mizbeach. It's done by the same person as before. So the Gemara now just points out that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda cannot hold like each other. Rabbi Yehuda, we had seen on Daf Chafei, Rabbi Yehuda says that there was no drawing, there was no lottery for who brings in the shovelful of coals to do the Ketoros. There was no separate lottery for that. It's a 2-man job, Ketoros, one to bring the spices and one to bring the coals, but there's only one lottery, and the one who won the right to bring the spices turns to the person on his right and says, you're going to bring the coals. But there was no separate lottery. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda has got one lottery less. And Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is also missing one lottery because he says there was no lottery for the person who was going to bring up the parts of the carbon tamid from the ramp to the top of the Mizbeach. So if we go with both of them, we only have 3 lotteries. We're missing one. So you can't combine those 2 opinions. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov has to hold that there was a separate lottery for the shovelful of coals, and Rabbi Yehuda has to hold that there was a separate lottery for who brings the parts up to the Mizbeach. That way they each get to 4. Nobody has 3 and nobody has 5. So Gemara says, but if you will find a Brisa out there that says that there were 5 lotteries, so then that Brisa obviously holds like neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov and has actually extra lottery, and that's why he has 5. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses that some days and some circumstances more than the original 9 people were needed to bring the carbon tamid onto the Mizbeach. We know that the carbon and tamid itself, including all its parts and its nesachim, needed 9 people to bring them up, but sometimes there were additional things that needed to be done. The Gemara says sometimes it was a 10th, sometimes 11, and sometimes 12 people that were needed. How does this work? So the Gemara says on Sukkot you needed a 10th person to carry the water. There's Nisach HaMayim added to the carbon tamid, the pouring water on the Mizbeach. That requires a 10th person. Now, when would you need 11? So there's 2 ways you would need 11. First of all, every afternoon by the carbon tamid Shabbat Arbaim, you needed 11 because 2 pieces of wood had to be added to the fire. Each one required a separate kohen. That was part of the avodah of the carbon tamid in the afternoon, so that would be 11. Also, every Shabbos you needed 11. And that's because the 2 spoonfuls articles of spices that were on the lechem apanim, they were added to the mizbeach at that time as well. The levona, they were added to the mizbeach. One kohen brought each of those, and that gets us to 11. When it would be 12. So this is when Shabbos on Sukkot, so you have the 2 extra spices, that's 11, and plus you also have the water, so that's 12. That's the end of the Mishnah. The Gemara now points out, and the Gemara says, based on this, you see that the water was only poured on the Mizbeach as part of the Nesachim on Sukkot. That only happened in the morning. It didn't happen in the afternoon. Because if it happened in the afternoon, then every afternoon of Sukkot, even on Chalamayit, even during the week, when it's not Shabbos, or Yom Tov when it's not a Shabbos, you would have 12 then, because you would have 2 bringing the wood, and you have an additional bringing the water. Obviously, in the afternoon, there was no water. The Gemara says that we have a Mishnah that seems to reflect this as well. The Mishnah reports that whenever the Kohen was pouring the water as part of that Chamayim, the people would tell him, do it clearly, we want to see what you're doing, lift up your hands so we could see what you're doing. Wanted to make sure that he was pouring it into the bowl, the basin on the Mizbeach that had a hole in it that went down deep into the ground, and that he wasn't doing something else with it, because there was one time a Kohen who was doing it who was a Tzeduki, and he didn't believe in his Chamayim, so instead of pouring it in the hole, he cheated, and he poured it on his feet. So the Mishnah reported that the people there all stoned him with their esrogim. So the Mishnah says, why does it say they stoned him with their esrogim? Why don't you just say they stoned him? Why do you have to tell me what they stoned him with? Obviously, to tell you that everybody was holding their esrog, and that is coming to teach you the chiddush that the pouring of the water only happened when everybody had their esrogim in their hands, which was in the morning. In the mincha time, in the afternoon, people weren't walking around with a little bit of esrog necessarily. Okay, on that topic, the Gemara quotes a brisa, which brings Rav Shimon bar Yochai, who says, how do you know that the carbon tamid of the afternoon requires 2 pieces of wood brought by 2 kahanim? So he says, because there's a pasuk that talks about 2 pieces of wood and 2 kahanim, and it's redundant, because we have a different pasuk talking about the woods that you bring in the morning. Now the 2 pasukim are as follows. As far as the wood of the morning, the pasuk says, so it says, ubir, in the singular form, HaKohen, in the singular form, he should burn a piece of wood on the fire in the morning. That's every morning. That refers to the Kohen who arranged the wood in the fire, and he put 2 logs on the fire before the carbon tamid was brought. It was part of the avodah of the Trumas Hadeshin. Now, if a different pasuk says, "V'nastu bnei Aaron HaKohen eish al hamizbeach v'orchu eitzim al eish," this has 2 differences from the other pasuk that we've seen. First of all, it says plural, bnei Aaron, and it says v'orchu, they should plural. Also, it says archu instead of beer. Instead of using the word beer to describe adding wood, it uses the word archu. So Gemara is a bit confused about what Rav Shimon bar Yochai means. The Gemara first thought that he means to say that it's that he's teaching that it's plural and that it's additional to the afternoon. That it's 2 kahanim, 2 pieces of wood, and it's performed in the afternoon. Now, the way Rav Shimon bar Yochai phrases it is he says that this pasuk can't be referring to the tamid of the morning, because we have a different pasuk that says it. They have the other pasuk that we quoted that was singular. So it has to be referring to the afternoon, and that's how you know 2 kahanim put 2 pieces of wood in the afternoon. So Gemara says, well, how do you know that it's referring to the afternoon? Just because we have a different pasuk talking about the morning, maybe it's 2 different things. You have to do 2 things in the morning. First, you have 1 kayin who brings 1 piece of wood, and then you have 2 kahanim afterwards who come and bring 2 pieces of wood. So Gemara says, Rav Shimon, that the response to that is, if that's what it's saying, then it should say ubir twice. It shouldn't say ubir v'archu. So Gemara assumes that means that why does it switch from singular to plural? So Gemara says, what do you mean? Because it's coming to teach you that it's supposed to be plural. That's why you switch. But no, that's not what I mean. I don't mean switching from singular to plural. I mean, why does it switch from the language of ubir to orach? Good as it just said, the singular and the plural is not the point. The point is that in the first pasuk it used the word beer, and the next it uses the word arach to refer to placing the wood on the fire. Obviously, it's 2 different activities. One is in the morning, and one is in the afternoon. Karbanos tamid. Okay, now the Gemara points out that we've said that there could be 9, 10, 11, or 12 people doing the avodah of the carbon tamid. Altogether, when there were 9, there were 13 lots drawn, because there were 4 other lots drawn as we had seen. So the Gemara says that the total number of lots then could be 13, 14, 15, or 16. This is 4 more than the people who are involved in the carbon tamid. So the Gemara says, but I have a brisa that says there were sometimes a 17. where it says that Brisa doesn't hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov said that they didn't need to draw lots to bring the pieces from the ramp to the Mizbeach. That Tana disagrees, says no, they had to draw one more lot, and that person was the person who brought the pieces up the ramp to the top of the Mizbeach. Okay, this brings us to our last Mishnah, which will conclude the daf. The Mishnah talks about other karbanos besides for the carbon tamid, and it talks about the animals. So the carbon tamid was a sheep, was a lamb, was a keves. The Gemara talks about a carbon ayil and a carbon par, an adult ram and an adult cow. So the Gemara says that the ayil required 11 people to bring up its carbon, the same 9 as the carbon tamid, the keves, plus 2 more because it was an extra measure of flour and an extra measure of wine. So that's 2 more kahanim. Now, a par, a cow, that took 24 people, and the reason is that the pieces were big, and 2 people were required to bring a lot of them up. So the Mishnah lists them off. The first thing to go was the head and the right hind leg. The head was carried by 1 person, the right hind leg was carried by 2 people. Next came the tail section and the left hind leg, at least according to this Tana. The tail was carried by 2 people, the hind leg was carried by 2 people. Next came the chest and the neck and all its attached organs. The chest was carried by 1 person, and the neck was carried by 3 people. Next were the 2 front legs. That was 2 people. Then came the 2 side walls. That was 2 people. Then came the innards, the intestines, and the flour and the wine. That was 3 each, for a grand total of 24 people. So Gemara says this is all talking about karbanos tzibor that come from an ayil and a par. However, if somebody wants to bring a personal private carbon, a carbon yachid, it could all be done by 1 person. One Kohen could do all the bringing everything up. I'll have to go back and forth a couple of times, but he doesn't need to spread it out and split it up amongst more individuals. The Mishnah concludes, and it says that the skinning and the cutting up of the animals were all equal. Equal means, the Gemara explains, equal means that a non-Kohen was allowed to.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.